Welcome to the Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. First up in this episode, I catch up with David Ian Gray, founder and strategist behind retail consultancy Dig 360. We touch base on his ongoing and recent research into consumer behavior in partnership with Leger in a Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and Boxing Day Consumer Shopping Results 2019. Next, Cherilyn Jolly-Nagel, farmer advocate spokesperson, joins me again on the podcast after our session together in Ottawa at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's Market Access Summit. We catch up after the summer growing season and fall harvest season and discuss the incredible forces and mega trends in the food industry, how they're impacting farmers and ultimately food on retailer shelves. Finally recorded live in Montreal at RCC's DTLQC conference, Michelle Sirois, president of Blue Star Canada, walks us through the retail technology product infrastructure, the impact of big platform on product trends such as 5G and enhanced security, and unpacks the role of distributors and value-added resellers in the retail industry. Lastly, I'll hit the highlights from retail this week for the week of December 16th. But first, let's jump into my interview with David Ian Gray. David, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you?
I'm good, Michael.
Listen, you and I have known each other a long time, but for the listeners, take us a little bit through your personal and professional journey.
I guess the early part of my career was a little bit eclectic. It was one of the biggest corporations in Canada, Imperial Oil, and early career in finance and ops, but it was a bit too big. And then varying things over a number of years, including environmental and strategy and research. And I found myself in the late 90s in the world of retail. You know, I laugh. A bunch of us who were back from that era, we kind of laugh saying, you know, sucked in and it's hard to leave. But it's been really rewarding. And what I ended up doing was I'm very interested in transformation and how organizations and people personally transform over an arc of time. And I coupled that with the background I had early on, which was around the dialogue and decision making that goes into strategic decisions. I kind of found a wedge into retail early on, which was producing research and studies for the sector broadly and for specific retail clients. Became very adept at tailoring research to retail as opposed to broad-based research technique. But I was naive, and back in those days, this was the era when retail was actually fairly uncompeted compared to now. And it was, you'll remember the days you put, if you had a concept where you had a margin that worked and people liked your product, you would just start rolling out stores under a formula. And the whole thing was to be quite linear in execution and really just build stores, source product, mark it up, get staff, have the staff do what they're told, and you can make a lot of money doing that. And back in those days, this whole transformation notion in my head, a lot of my early business was telcos and finance because retail was doing pretty well. And it wasn't really until the American and global onslaught and then e-com and online and such where retail has gone through a real kind of internal transformation, and suddenly it lines up. But that's the beginning. And then I've got a boutique out in Vancouver. We do advisory with senior leaders at predominantly specialty chains, but the larger regional or national guys. And it's on that theme of, everything from diagnosing to navigating, road mapping through what undoubtedly is really a transformation collectively, but each organization has their individual journey. And we try to help as best we can, and we've had a lot of fun doing it. I got a few other guys with me, but it's a small, nimble group.
Well, you've had a front window seat, and in some ways a seat in the driver's seat of 20 years plus of tremendous transformation of retail. And one of the things you and I often talk about is, as part of this transformation, these new holidays, this Black Friday, Cyber Monday. You've been doing research on this for years. I think it's always interesting. I think you're interested in it. Just even if you weren't in retail, it's just so fascinating to try and understand it. So I want to touch base with you on. You just released the Black Friday and holiday shopping report. So you kind of do a pre and post. It looks like you do some work with Leger, which Retail Council works with as well. So it's a great firm. So just hot off the press, some insights into Black Friday and holiday shopping in Canada. Take us through what you learned about this season?
Well, for this, this season doesn't sort of exist totally in a microcosm. And, the growth in Canada, which I always thought was a ridiculous proposition to do Black Friday here, I still kind of do. Early days, 08, 09, but 2010, 2011, it started to just run through the sector. And what we've found is more or less it's plateaued the last few years. And by that, I mean, I'll use this year as an example, and then I'll compare it back. But we found about 55% of Canadians this year, adult Canadians, took part in Black Friday. And by taking part, it's one of two things. It's either buying product or it's you're browsing at least, like you're actively looking. You may opt, you're not getting what you wanted or at the price, but you're engaged with it. Mm-hmm. And that means 45% weren't. And the last few years, the percentages are up and down a little bit, but it's fairly consistent. And I think that's the first sort of meaning here that we need to talk about is not everybody engages on Black Friday. On the other hand, for a particular season or week or even day, you don't need everyone engaging in it. Half the public engaging in it is still quite substantive. I'm just making the point that there are people who don't get caught up in the hype. And I think the other point is, and I know there's research, and you guys do some good stuff earlier before Black Friday happens. And I think one of the confusion, the media always wants to know, well, how is Black Friday compared to Boxing Day? But Boxing Day is pretty clear cut. If you ask someone, did you buy something on Boxing Day? They'll say yes or no, but it was Boxing Day. When you ask about Black Friday, it's really Black Friday month. Like people are buying the stuff. They're seeing the deals, as late October. It was a little bit delayed this year in terms of the visible promotions, but people are buying all the way through the seasons. When people we talked to after the fact said they bought Black Friday deals, about half of them buy on the day and the rest are buying on other days through the month of November. And I think that's kind of, early on surveys that are done, maybe September, October, they're often, I think, getting people saying, hey, we're going to shop Black Friday, but the person's not really thinking whether it's that day. They just know they're going to get a Black Friday deal. And I think those numbers line up. So we found in Canada, about 37% of people bought a Black Friday deal this year, which is quite a lot of people. It was 19% on the day of. And that's quite consistent. Last year it was 17% on the day of. The year before it was 17% on the day of. So it's a big sample. It's about 1,500 people. Leger Christian Bork over there. He's fantastic. And what we do a little different is we go out after Black Friday. So what we're trying to do is find out what really happened. And we started doing that in 2010 because there's a lot of, back then the mythology around it was the media was saying every Canadian and their cat was cross-border shopping. I don't know if you remember those days, but the whole story there was cross-border, and we just kind of knew it wasn't exactly the case. So we wanted to shine a light on it and see what the truth was. So that's what we're doing. So those are a couple of our big, top-level findings. I'll kind of pause there because you may have some directions you want to take it.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for giving the highlight. And you mentioned the survey that I was involved in. Retail Council of Canada did a survey with Leger as well. Great shop. And a lot of these numbers are starting to line up in some ways. And you're right about a couple of things. You're right about many things, if not all. About definitionally, when you ask people, are you going to shop a Black Friday deal? That could be the week prior. That could be the day after. So it's nice that you kind of hone in on day of. When I spoke to retailers coast to coast, they had a great Black Friday weekend as we defined it. And we're trying to figure out what Cyber Monday does as a bookmark event. And when I look at some of your numbers, they start to line up. So, when we talk to Canadians in October about intention, and again, this is intention, very different from what you're measuring, which is what I actually did. 43% said they were going to shop on a Black Friday, shop a Black Friday deal, and I think your numbers are in the high.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty spot on. And people, When you're asking people in advance, so we do a little bit of that ourselves. We play that because we also ask about their intention for Boxing Day and Boxing Week. And when we go out then the next year, we say, did you shop last year on Boxing Day? And what we find is it's always overstated when people are speculating what they might do. On the day of, things come up. It's easier to say, yeah, I'm probably going to do it, and then not do it in reality. So, those things are good indicators. And the other way they kind of serve a purpose, Mike, is if you're comparing your October number to the year before, it's a real gauge on customer sentiment, shopping sentiment, because if the numbers are up, it means they're interested in buying. But I would say they line up there. The other one, you and I had a little chat when that was out, and I was pretty adamant that I thought Black Friday is still not going to match Boxing Day in terms of we're looking at the human side of it, so the percentage of people who are engaged in the event. So we were, I was still pretty certain that Boxing Day would hang on at least a little longer as being the more trafficked and bought day, not necessarily in sales dollars, but in people out there. And I'm actually, we did a bunch of predictions beforehand. We're pretty spot on with the percentage that we're buying through the month and the day, but we were wrong on Cyber Monday, and we might be a little wrong on Boxing Day. So I'm now saying Boxing Day, I think, is going to be in a dead heat with Black Friday, which from our purposes will be the first time that's happened. And so you get that one. And then the other one that it really surprised me.
Well, good for you. I mean, I love the fact you make predictions, because it's so you put yourself out there and you make the predictions, and we all make predictions. You make more than I, and sometimes you're right. You're not right. You're not correct, or you're off, and that's okay, right? Because you're making predictions, and they're all intelligent, informed, and one way or the other, it adds insight.
Well, hey, I appreciate that.
Thank you for doing that.
You don't want to know about my weather forecasting. I kind of think I'm good at that. I go by, do I have aches in my knees and stuff? Cyber Monday I find very, very interesting, because I don't get it anymore. There's these things that just bug me, and Cyber Monday meant a lot when Black Friday in the States was all bricks and mortar. But now you've got Black Friday is totally online. So I'm kind of thinking, well, what's Cyber Monday? But I guess, on the one hand, it's the ability to continue marketing and not really extend the fatigue factor of the shopper hearing the same message. You get a little refresh there. And but I think the Cyber Monday, in our data, it was up a bit over last year, and we did a little call around with different execs, and they were saying that there was a bump.
What you're hearing is what I'm hearing, and some. We heard when we talked to retailers coast to coast as well, that it was a good year over year. It was a good Black Friday weekend. A little soft on the Sunday afternoon in Eastern Ontario, because we had a bit of bad weather that put a dent into a bit of momentum. Some picked it up on their online sales, others did not. And some talked about, interestingly, because you bring up this great point, what is Cyber Monday in this world of omni-channel? And some said, well, listen, it's a bookmarked event. So it's just another chance to promote, as you just said, put another kind of spin on the same or different or slightly, varied promotions. But some are starting to use it like an early Boxing Day, which is, I thought, really interesting. In other words, let's take a first early pulse on maybe a few items that we have a few too many of, which, of course, traditionally has been one of the rationales behind Boxing Day. So I thought that was interesting. I think there was some success in that too, in that thinking that, we need to differentiate the strategy somehow. So, let's continue the same deals probably, but and let's roll out some that maybe we've got a few too many of even before you get to Boxing Day. Because, as you said right from the top, it's late this year, right? It's the 29th, 6 less shopping days in the month of December. So, everybody's got to hustle. That's for sure.
I'll throw a couple of things though. So those are kind of the high scene set things, and sort of what's the lay of the land. But there's a few things that have started to catch my attention a little bit that are worth watching, and I'll share with you and see what you think. we started tracking 3 years ago Singles Day, which is globally it's the biggest selling day of the year, but we wouldn't really know it here. It's November 11th.
Remembrance Day.
That's going to be dealt with very gently. But globally, and particularly in Asia, it is a massive day. And we thought, well, when Black Friday began, it started, with a bit of a whimper, and we were tracking it. So we wanted to get in ahead of it to benchmark. It's still pretty low, but what's interesting is we're about 8% of Canadians bought Singles Day items. And that's actually not bad.
Wow.
The important part, though, is awareness of what it is only sitting at about 36%. And it reminds me of when Black Friday in Canada was starting to take off. The big issue there was a lot of Canadians really didn't know what it was. And once it became ubiquitous. So I don't think it's ever going to become a major day because there'd be such a backlash with overhype because it is Remembrance Day. But keep in mind, people are buying globally now through online. And my guess would be there's a lot of people who come from China, other Asian countries who are locked in on Alibaba to begin with, which is really the Alibaba Day. What I noticed this year is other brands are starting to pile on. Like Ted Baker was running a online Singles Day promotion. So it's just going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And I would agree that in Canada, you're not going to see domestic hype, but you may see some dollars bleed out offshore on that one. The other thing that we tracked last year for the first time is friction around online deliveries at this time of year because of the Canada Post strike. And that was a one-off. That was a unicorn moment, but we kept the question in. And so the question is, for people who bought Black Friday item, they experienced any delays in their online orders. And 26% of the people said they experienced delays. Now, whether that was a true delay or they just thought it should be here faster, and it doesn't matter because the point is it was an expectation. What we did differently this year is we also asked, looking forward to the gift giving side of things at Christmas time and Hanukkah, do you have any concerns about timeliness of the order and accuracy of the order? And we had a significant number. It's about 40. This is all fresh off the press. I'm doing the numbers here from my head, but about 47% had some concerns around both of those things. And I think who tapped on that last year during the postal strike, and they're running the ads again, was Winners, Marshalls, and HomeSense, with their their campaign about offline shopping and how it's novel and new. And I think what we're going to see two parts to that means something. One is I think we're going to see people turning back to stores more quickly. Like probably already now they're there because if it's for a gift, if it's local, if it's something you're trying to get overseas or whatever, you might be hooped now already. But if it's local, I think people are going to be turning to stores. The other, aspect to this is you've got this high volume time is really stressful. When I talk to retailers, I'm sure you do too. It's a very stressy time of year for them. And it's all about peaks and valleys, right? Like one day could be off the charts and your staff are going nuts trying to either ship items from a warehouse or try and keep stock on the shelf. And then you get a down day. The issue though is high volume days are showing you the future. And so it's your stress test on the systems you're creating. And almost everyone has this magic number. They think they're going to get 20% e-com business, in the near future. I think the issue is we're not quite ready yet. I don't think we're game ready to be proficient at high volume year-round e-com. But it's a good chance to test it out. And I think you're seeing the organizations that are getting through it without too many hiccups, they can be a little bit more confident that they can start building for that future. And the ones that are struggling through a tough Black Friday with orders and systems down, they know they got work to do.
Well, David, you've got tremendous insight into retail. So thank you so much for joining me. I can't believe I've had the podcast for this many episodes, and this is the first time you've been on it. So that's my bad, but let's make sure that we continue to rectify that in 2020 and have you on and talk about Boxing Day and insights for the new year, all kinds of great stuff. So in the interim, how can people get hold of you, or perhaps even a glimpse of this, is this study available
I think
from
the
your
easiest
website?
way is www.dig360, dig360.ca. And by the way, thanks for having me on and doing this. I had a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
Cherilyn, welcome back to the Voice of Retail. How are you doing?
Thanks, Michael. I'm great. Thank you very much. I'm looking out my office window at a lot of snow, and that's good for farmers, but it's also really good because we own snowmobiles, and that makes getting through the winter that much more fun.
Oh, fantastic. Well, for my listeners who didn't, or maybe didn't have a chance to hear our first interview, catch us up a little bit. Tell us a bit about yourself and your connection to the food on the shelves of retailers coast to coast.
Sure, thanks. I'm a fourth-generation farmer, and I'm farming with my husband, who is likely also 4 or 5 generations into farming. So this is what we both grew up doing. There's no cattle, no livestock on our farm operation. We grow chickpeas and lentils. We grow durum wheat, which makes pasta, canola, and this year we put some barley into our rotation. It's a family farm operation. We farm with David's brother and my sister-in-law. His parents are still here. About 20 miles down the road is my brother and my dad and all of my family down there, and they're busy farming as well. So this is what we grew up doing, and we're really happy being farmers today and raising our 2 daughters. Claire's 13 and Addison's 11 in 2 more sleeps. So we're happy. Yeah, happy raising the kids out here and enjoying life on the farm in Saskatchewan.
And when we talk about a farm, we're not talking about a hobby farm here. My recollection was 18,000 acres. Am I close?
Yes, that's correct.
And each acre, for us who are less familiar with that kind of measurement, that's like about a football field, right? An acre is more or less like about a football field. So we're really talking a massive enterprise, right?
Yeah, wow.
I
guess so. In Saskatchewan, we tend to fall back on sports analogies, and everybody here is a Saskatchewan Rough Rider fan. So, yeah, a football field is roughly the size of an acre, and that's helpful for my non-farming friends to picture the size of a football field. Mm-hmm. So we have about 18,000 of those. It's not, terribly uncommon in Western Canada to have a farm size of that nature. Farm sizes are getting bigger. I'm not sure exact. I think the average farm size in Saskatchewan is roughly around 2,000 acres, call it 2,500. So it's larger than average, but it isn't uncommon, especially in this area. We do have, 3 families that are farming, in this one family farm entity. So when you break that up into 3 separate farms, the number doesn't seem quite so unmanageable.
Right. You and I were recently together in Ottawa for a summit put on by Agriculture Canada and Agri-Food. So we had a brief time to chat. You were very popular, so I'm doing this call back from Toronto back to Montbank. But let's catch the listeners up on the summer. You and I spoke initially in late spring of this year. How was the summer? You mentioned a couple of things thrown at you, and let's give me a quick overview of how your summer went in terms of the farm.
The entire growing season for 2019 was very challenging. We were coming into the spring looking like we were dealt the drought card. There was very little subsoil moisture, very little moisture in general while we were planting the seeds. And, come the middle of June, we were quite concerned and quite convinced that this was going to be a year of drought and we may not have much of anything to harvest. And then we had a complete change of weather pattern, and we started to get rain, and we got quite a bit of rain, more than our annual average. So we got a lot of rain after that point, which meant that, the crops in the field weren't growing at exactly the same time. But for the most part, the yields were great. We had better than average yield on our durum, and, we actually did quite well in terms of yielding. It did pose some problems for the pulse crops and the disease. Pulse crops are subject to a lot of disease, and when there's extra moisture, that disease bed is pretty prominent. So we struggle with disease again this year in the pulse crops. We also had, hail. I think it was 3 times we had hailstorms come through, which damaged the barley crops, I would say, the most substantially. We lost probably 30% or more of our barley crops, maybe more, to hail. So that was another curveball that Mother Nature threw us. And it was just a really challenging year where you and I were at the summit for trade and market access, and trade was a really tumultuous issue for farmers this year. Lots of fighting going on in global trade. So that was also playing a role in the hardship of 2019 and incredibly low commodity prices. So, we kind of got a little bit of everything this year. And I think most farmers in this area were very happy to see 2019 close and say goodbye to that one.
Well, that's a nice segue to my next question, which is 2020 and beyond. What are the top issues on your mind? If you could speak on behalf of the farming community, where we continue to see global trade issues of all sorts and all kinds of things happening in that. But what's on your mind in terms of your industry?
Yeah, so definitely trade would be at the top of the list for us. We have a need for strong trade agreements, and at the moment, even the countries where I would have considered us to have really strong relationships with, the U.S., for example, we are connected by a border, and we should have strong trade agreements being neighbors. And right now, we still do not have the USMCA ratified. It does appear that we're making some progress on that file, so I'll hold my breath for a little bit. But trade agreements are certainly a strong need for our bulk export market, our bulk export nation. And, on top of that, we need new markets. We've got, relationships around the world that we've done business with for many, many years, but we're too reliant on them. We've seen the ramifications of that with China and India and the U.S. So we need new markets. We need to continuously build relationships with other countries around the world and find out how we can make some inroads selling what we grow here. And we think also, the general acceptance of technology is a file that I'm working on through other organizations like the Wheat Growers and the Global Farmer Network. We, in general, are trying to build a case for the acceptance of technology, and that's everything from biotechnology and GMOs to drones and the use of crop protection products. All of those things I put in a pile called technology. And consumers are getting less and less supportive of technology within the agriculture industry, and that will have a huge impact for those of us trying to farm into the future.
When we think about... sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to go on to a whole bunch of other things. So go ahead. You asked me for a list. I'm going to give you a long list.
It's a big list. When you think about the top 3 things, so clearly number 1 would be trade. What were the other 2 things? If you could put them into kind of 1, 2, and 3 as you think about 2020, both upside and challenges, but what would be the other 2 top priorities be if you had to rank them 1, 2, 3? 1 sounds like trade. What would the other 2 be?
Well, I guess if it's the Christmas season, I should probably have a bit of a wish list, but it's hard. It's hard to prioritize all of these things that our industry needs. But I suppose you're right. Trade, that would be our number 1. We need new markets. We need to be less reliant on a few. I guess also on my wish list would be acknowledgement from the federal government that they appreciate and support agriculture. Agriculture contributes substantially to the economy. That's through jobs, that's through GDP in general, that's through safe food. We need some acknowledgement from our federal government that they appreciate that, acknowledging and appreciating what agriculture is doing for this country. And oftentimes we're not even mentioned, in a throne speech or at all throughout campaign trails. And we need to hear that the government is supportive of us. So, they could ratify the USMCA. We could get that one moved along. But also, addressing the carbon tax. At least showing.
Now, what's your perspective on what's your perspective on the carbon tax? How does it impact you and farmers specifically, so that it raises to one of those three things?
Yeah, it definitely affects the farmers today. We are contributing to the environmental sustainability. Farmers are part of the answer. We are not crippling Mother Nature. Every year, we are making decisions that help us leave the land in better shape for the next generation. So I think the carbon tax, we could have had a really good news story coming out of agriculture. When the government wanted to address the issue of the environment in general, but carbon and global climate change, all of those things, they could have pointed to agriculture and said, look at all the amazing things we have done over the past several decades to improve the land, improve the environment. But instead, we felt, as an industry, attacked when the carbon tax came out. It was pointing the finger at agriculture, saying, this is how you're going to pay for what you've done. And we kind of got out of the tractor and went, what do you mean? Like, we've made all of these amazing decisions that we forgot to tell you about. Sorry about that. But give us a minute. Let's explain, what we've been able to do and how we're actually contributing to the situation we're in today. So I certainly would add that to my list of things. And then lastly, I would add, it would be a toss-up between a reliable, cost-effective, efficient transportation system, everything from getting, the trucking and the roads, from getting the grain, on the farm all the way to the elevator, and then on the railway out to the Port of Vancouver, and then we've got some port situations and demurrage charges and all of these things that relate to the transportation of what we grow out to the markets that we need. But lastly, if I could have, that last wish, it would be to have, well-informed consumers. I see this trend building to a point where consumer food trends are having an impact in how we are able to grow food. Those food trends are not necessarily aligning with really sound science evidence. And I would point to glyphosate as an example, GMOs as an example. Man, we just really need consumers to take a look at what their information sources are and start including some farmers in their questions. I kind of make it, a mission of mine to talk to as many consumers as I can throughout the year, especially through the wintertime when we're not busy. But through the wintertime, talking to consumers about their fears when it comes to food, their choices that they're making, and doing the best that I can to answer some of the questions that they have and subside some of the fear that's been, flitting about the social media industry for sure, about, scary things happening on the farm and what that means for people's food.
We talked about that in our first interview, so I am glad you brought that up, and the fact that, and we won't go into it in this interview. I'll put a link to the last one, and just how, as a community or as a business, farmers just kind of, didn't really focus on that, what the message was happening in and around them. So I'm glad you brought that up. Let's transition that thought into the grocery retailers. What's your advice to grocery retailers across the country? How can we, as an industry, collectively help our farmers deliver quality and value and a coherent message to consumers? Because, the number one touch point for products are the retailers. So what advice would you have or message would you have for retailers coast to coast?
Well, definitely retailers play an important piece of this whole food conversation. So I'm a farmer, and the challenge for me is that what I grow on my farm operation is not in the form of a product that I sell directly to the consumer. So I grow chickpeas and lentils. Both of those are not processed here on my farm, so they go into a bulk market. Durum wheat is not processed here on my farm, so I don't grind it up to make the flour, the semolina that makes pasta. I don't have a canola oil processing plant here, so I'm shipping bulk canola. Same with barley. We don't make our own beer on the farm either. So what I grow is a bulk product that gets shipped off this farm and into various other products that the retail industry will then put on the shelf. So I'm a consumer too, and when I'm walking around the grocery store, I often see the products that are grown on my farm in a value-added form. And that can be a really cool story, and I can get pretty excited about that and talk to my kids about that. But also I can be frustrated because the product that left my farm was, a safe, healthy food. And then when I see it in the grocery store, sometimes the labeling or the marketing around those products makes it look as though there should be a sense of fear around what people choose. And I'll give you an example. I've taken a picture of a package of celery in a grocery store in Saskatchewan, and on the package of celery was a gluten-free label. And I was so perplexed by this, thinking, first of all, celery, come on. I think celery's sole purpose in life is the garnish on a Caesar. So it's really not, it's not contributing in terms of our overall health. So good on you, celery. But somebody in the marketing department for celery thought that putting a gluten-free label on the package was a good way to sell more celery. And that indicates to me how far away from the farm we've gotten. And it's a reminder of the true and valuable information that Canadians really need when it comes to their food. We are so privileged in this country to have access to this kind of abundance of safe, healthy food. Canadians should not be worried about the food safety or the health of their food. Having said that, I'm also really interested in the nutritional value of the food. I'm a mother, so I'm feeding my kids, I'm feeding my family, and I'm trying to do a good job of that. So I want safe and healthy food, but Canada is a leader when it comes to providing safe, healthy food choices. And my message to the retailers is to be very transparent and honest about the labeling and the marketing of the products that are on your shelves. And I understand that this is a marketing industry and you're trying to sell products, but it's important that we address the fear that Canadians have around their food and not play into that, those consumer trends.
Well, I think you so well stated and such a great overview of the industry. And I wanted to thank you for coming back on to the Voice of Retail. Let's catch up again real soon in the spring, and we'll see how these issues continue to proceed and resolve themselves. But for now, I wanted to wish you a happy holidays and safe travels wherever you go, and a great season for growing next year. And thanks again for joining me on the Voice of Retail.
Michael, I really want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to reach the retail industry. As a farmer, I want to be able to answer questions that the retail industry has from the farmer's perspective, right from the farm gate. If there's people within your network that want to call or want to come out to the farm, need a farm tour, really need a stronger connection back to the farm, I do hope they consider this as an invitation and an opportunity for me to connect them back to the farming community that's growing this food. I think that's an imperative connection that we need to build.
Well, that's a great point. And how can retailers and listeners find you online? Do you have a website? What can we point them to?
Yeah, I do have a website. I'm not great at the promotion side of it, but listen, you can. I do have a website. It's www.Cherilyn@CherilynJolly-Nagel.com. And you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I just want to make myself available, absolutely. And you can certainly email me. And if you contact Michael, he knows how to get a hold of me, too.
Well, perfect. Well, thanks, Cherilyn. Thanks for being my guest, and I wish you again a great winter and a great spring for planting.
Thank you so much, Michael. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to hang out with you.
Michelle, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm happy that we're in the same place at the same time here in Montreal, Retail Council of Canada's event. Thank you for joining us. It's great to see you again. You and I have been in different places around the world.
We have.
Together. So I thought a great opportunity for those listeners, for my listeners, to introduce yourself and a little bit about Blue Star and really talk about the ecosystem around retail in terms of hardware, technology, and services. But why don't we start with a little bit about your personal and professional journey?
Sure. I've always been into the logistics side of the business. Started in logistics and transportation for a number of years. Then I joined an organization in technology tied to barcoding. The first couple of years of the barcoding era that lasted for, 10, 15 years. So the Zellers of this world,
sure,
and Sears and on and on.
Very resilient barcodes, right? I mean, they're still one of the only few things that are adopted universally across all industries, right?
You know what? A lot of people are talking about migrating from barcoding to something else, i.e. RFID or whatnot, but if it's a simple data capture, one single field, it's the most reliable and cheapest way of capturing data.
And then that's what kind of put the spike into RFID, right?
Sure.
It sounds on one hand very wonderful, but then when you start to add up the little RFIDs and tens of hundreds of millions of products. Anyway, we're getting off course, but I just wanted to talk about that. So let's get back to you.
So lasted with the barcoding technology for quite some time. Then I joined a manufacturer, i.e. Motorola, who became Zebra.
Yeah.
Led the organization in Canada for a couple of years, and 6 years ago I joined Blue Star.
Right.
So always in the logistics technology side of the business.
Yeah.
Very exciting, and it's a ever-changing world. And it's not slowing down.
Well, let's talk about Blue Star specifically, and that will help us understand the ecosystem. Tell me who Blue Star is and what you do for a living, what the company does.
Right. So privately held distributor of technology, very focused and niched on a couple of verticals. We're not a broadband distributor. There's no appetite for us to do this. Why? Because one of the mission we got is not to be a box pusher. If we can use a slang word, we're not a box pusher. So we truly focus on value add. And there's a couple of verticals, i.e. retail, POS, digital signage, mobile, and mobility that impose a bit more knowledge, a bit more understanding. When there's complexity, there's value and margin. So these are the focused area that Blue Star is involved in. Worldwide organization with head office in Cincinnati / Hebron, Kentucky. So one is beside the other. And we're a division of Blue Star Corporate with headquarter in Montreal, but offices across the system in Canada.
So help us unpack that ecosystem a little bit. So, retailers, restaurants, they all have phenomenal from point of sale to networks to whatever. And how walk me through how that product gets to be in those stores and what your role is in this kind of ecosystem.
Right.
So you've been on the manufacturing side, Motorola to Zebra.
Yeah.
But what's your role in terms of making those products come to life in and with retailers?
So one of the rules that are golden rules for distributors, i.e. a Blue Star, is we never deal with the end user customer, right? So the end user being the retailers.
Yep.
Our mission in life is to teach, educate, enable, work with value-added resellers. So the way to go to market for us is through value-added resellers. And the way we do this, and what's unique about us, is I take the challenger sales approach. The challenger sales states that you got to bring insights to the customer. So insights, in our case, to the VARs. Insights being, again, through teaching, through educating, through new trends, to what are we seeing in the market. And the beauty of this tea is you have a 180-degree visibility on the market. So we live trends, right? So when you've got a product group that goes skyrocket and other product groups that decline for a certain period of time, this becomes sort of trends.
And you feel that rise or decline organically, right? In other words, your partners are just asking you for less of those products to distribute less of those products. So that's how you kind of take the pulse. You're one step away from the front, but it allows you to step back and see the broader trends.
Correct. Plus, don't forget that the vendor, i.e. the manufacturers, are also customers, right? So you got to learn from them. You got to educate yourself. What is the next phase of technology that they're going to be releasing? To give you an example of this, 5, 6, 7 years ago, mobility was through Windows Mobile, right? So Microsoft products. 5, 6 years ago, the trend that we saw is this moving to Android. So at that time, 70% of our sales were through Microsoft. Today, it's completely the opposite. 70% is Android. So we see trends with what's being purchased, but we also see trends with what's being manufactured and what's being decided to manufacture.
Right on. And you and I have talked about trends like personal devices that become in store. We've talked about point of sale that is transforming from a self-serve all the way to your Amazon Go, which, in one way threatens a lot of livelihoods in the infrastructure, but it's really the change you experience and have been living for your career, but certainly from a Blue Star perspective, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What are we seeing these days? Just to give you an example, because of lack of resources or employees out there that are available, I think the RCC stated that 250,000 jobs were not filled in 2018 because of lack of people. So what is the market reacting, or how is the market reacting, I should say, is self-serve. So you see the kiosks in all shape, form, sizes appearing in the market. And we just had a conference a couple of minutes ago where the Moneris guy was saying that you see 20% hike of the shopping cart when it's kiosks. So retailer is also about analytics. So they recognize this. So not only do they not have to employ people, the shopping cart increases. Right. So we are absolutely seeing a shift from individuals or employees servicing customers where it applies to kiosk approaches to the business.
Well, I hear that trend as well, and what retailers like to say is, first of all, customers like self-serve checkout in the appropriate at the appropriate time in the appropriate place, and it also allows them to free up the staff that is in the store to do more value-added work with the customers, right? So they can go in and talk about matching the right cheese to the right wine and let people check out as they see fit. So you're seeing that example.
Absolutely.
What about an infrastructure perspective? Lots of stuff going on in the security space, keeping your network secure. Is that on top of mind for you? And
so it is on top of mind, but it's migrating so fast. So 3G to 4G, we've been on 4G for 10 years, right? So 5G is just around the corner. I was with AT&T in the U.S. a couple of months ago. They are deploying 5G, right? They are absolutely accelerating the deployment of 5G. The reason I'm talking about 5G is latency and lack of speed and whatnot is going to disappear. So therefore, you already have, for infrastructure purposes, you already have manufacturers that are 5G ready, right? That are ready for failover. So if always connected and your customers are always connected and they pay with Apple Pay or whatever, if the network goes sour, you can't operate anymore. So we're seeing more and more trends towards failover opportunities where you install something that resides on the 4G today as an example, but is 5G ready. That's an example of the infrastructure that we're seeing out there. Also, security is security, right? In Eastern Canada, we're hearing this week about Desjardins again with the breach. There's not a week that goes by now that you don't hear about a breach. The only disappointment that I would say in the observation that I make is VARs are not so or as concerned as they should be about security. Because when you install at an end user level, PCI states that you're responsible for the well-being of this install, right? I think there is a shift towards understanding this, but I believe that PCI and others have got a bit of work to do to make the VAR aware of the responsibility that they have when they install POS solutions and things like that.
Sure. So last question, how do people get a hold of you or Blue Star if they want to learn more and understand what you do? Website, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Well, website, phone call, right? So we've got pride in saying we've got 40 people in the country servicing from coast to coast. Could give us a call. They could give me a call. My business card has got my cell phone number. That's how available I am. But I think, through, again, end users, it is a bit challenging for us to get involved with end users. I think our model, as I stated, is through VARs.
Sure.
But easy access.
And you work with a whole host of VARs, and they can also be accessed and pointed in the direction through your site. But I mean, that would be the primary.
Today we've got a vicinity of about 12 to 1,300 active VARs in Canada in all verticals.
Right.
So again, we are present, we are available, and more than happy to engage, right?
Great. Well, thanks for joining me on The Voice of Retail. It's a real treat to see you as always, and I wish you a great week.
Likewise. Thank you very much.
Well, all right. Thanks to David, Cherilyn, and Michelle for being my guests in this episode. Now, let's hit the highlights from retail this week. First of all, I kick off with an article from Toronto Life, which is a look inside Eaton Centre's colossal new Apple store. So congratulations to Troy Dunn and the entire team. Great retailer, great operator, and a great team. Hundreds of people working at that store, and it's really the first one in Canada that is the embodiment of the newer vision. I saw that newer vision articulated in several countries, London, England, and most recently in New York City on the Fifth Avenue. It's a great store. Make sure and check it out. It's really, it is the latest iteration of the greatness that is Apple stores. Next, from Strategy Magazine, Matt and Nat goes beyond eco-friendly and vegan products. Page back a couple episodes, great interview with Matt and Nat's CEO. And you really kind of get a sense of how committed they are to the brand and how he and the organization is really so committed to what they're doing. So great article there from Strategy Magazine. From CTV, a holiday hustle, why more Canadians are shopping in-store than online. Experience is still king. We all know that. We've talked about this on the podcast many, many times, especially with the holidays. This is, quote, people like to get out. They like to see Santa, do the hustle and bustle. And it is one of the things that is the characteristic of holiday shopping. Fashion retailer Coase opens up a largest Canadian store on Robson Street. This is, of course, part of Coase is part of H&M, and is really 500 square meters, beautiful store. This from the Strait, also known as the George Strait. Big news, of course, with the purchase of Cineworld, buying Cineplex for $2.8 billion. Good video talking about that from BNN, and also videos from the House. This late breaking news, so to speak, on Thursday. The House in the U.S., House of Congress approves the USMCA trade deal. So, it's really kind of fascinating to watch. This is not a political podcast, but as on the one hand, the impeachment process rolls on. On the other hand, Democratic Congress approves this trade deal. So good for them, and kind of putting aside the fact that it gives Trump a win in some eyes, in many eyes, in terms of negotiating a treaty or closing a treaty. Certainly great job for the Canadian, Christopher Freeland, and the Canadian team has done a wonderful job in landing this plane, so to speak, bringing this home. Such an important trade deal. Great relief for retailers to have this one almost wrapped up. Stable staff stops scam, and they're the heroes, say witness this from CBC. One of these CRA scams, and a confused person in a St. John's store trying to do a money transfer, and the Stable staff just stepped in, intervened, and calmed that person down and saved him or her, it doesn't really say, actually, a tremendous amount of money. So congratulations to the sharp eyes and caring people at Staples. Retailing around the world, by 2023, the second-hand clothes market will double to $51 billion. We've talked about this trend before, and it's this intersection of Gen Z and the second-hand market and the rental economy and all these different things, sustainability. So more, this from Fast Company, more kind of anchoring into this trend. What else? More on Amazon's new grocery chain. This is from Canadian Grocery, are opening up a store in California in an old Toys R Us store, so a bit more information. Detective work, really, on what's going on there. Bed Bath & Beyond's new CEO just laid off his entire C-suite. So new CEO there at coming out of Target and for Bed Bath & Beyond, and deciding changing the bed, so to speak, in terms of clearing house and moving a whole new executive team in. From City Lab, kind of an interesting, a little bit of a quirky article, actually. The bankrupt American brand still thriving in Japan. And it goes through all these different brands that are gone from the landscape here in North America, like Dean and DeLuca. It's one of my favorite stores in the building, the New York Times building, gone. But it still lives on in Japan. Who knew? Franchisees, and the names are still strong. So fun article from City Lab. Lord & Taylor's plotting its comeback under the new owner, Le Tote. Isn't this interesting, from CNBC? Of course, Hudson's Bay sold the interest in Lord & Taylor to Le Tote, and now they're doing a pop-up store in Soho. Unfortunately, it'll be gone by the time I get back there for the big show in January. It's going to wrap up by the end of the holidays, but it's just interesting how Le Tote is taking what was a massive store and shrinking it down, putting it into Soho, and seeing what they can do. Let's see, what else from independent retailers. Oh, this is great. Great story from Retail Insider, Craig Patterson's Retail Insider. Unique retail concept, Reckless Bikes, expands the fourth location. What a great story Reckless Bikes is. And do check this out. 4 stores, very focused, tried to open in different places, but it's a great independent retailer. And winner, actually, in 2015 of Independent Retailer of the Year from Retail Council of Canada. So check that out. Financial Post just now starting to unpack all the different things that are going on in the Ontario cannabis market after a 1-year freeze. Rushes on to buy out Ontario's first wave of cannabis retail lottery winners. So I guess there's all kinds of legal details behind this around what you can buy and what you can't buy and when you can buy it. And how you can buy it out, and how you can transfer the license. Anyway, let's look forward to April when just the market gets opened up, and we can get the right number of cannabis stores started in this province, and of course, so important to the rest of the country with such a big market to help the entire infrastructure from LPs through to hiring, through to whatever. So we look forward to April, but in the meantime, we see lots of things evolving thanks to the complicated lottery winning process in Ontario. From CBC, City taking back the empty Queen Street West Market. So if you've ever been into Toronto on Queen Street, right across from the CTV office of the old City TV building, there's a great West market building, and it's just been a disaster. So I guess the city's taking that control of that back, so we can hope that brings vibrancy back to that space. Spotlight on digital supply chain. Online grocery shopping could explode in Canada from Maclean's. Diet really gets into the whole, amongst many other things, Sobeys Ocado deal that's going to be rolling out next year. And right now, they're J.C. Williams talking about here, online grocery purchases represent about $2 billion of 120 billion food. So it's really just say scratching the surface is an exaggeration, but it's kind of a good overview. Sobeys and what they're doing, and Loblaws and Metro, Walmart, and Amazon. Speaking of Amazon blocks sellers from using FedEx for Prime shipments. This made the news. Interesting, that control, man, as Amazon themselves get into supply chain and take steps to manage the experience, as they would say, by not allowing their marketplace shippers to use FedEx ground. Anyway, so fascinating. George Laurier, inventor of the UPC, and we'll hear Michelle Sirois talking about the importance of UPC, dies at 94. So you can think of two things that have revolutionized retail behind the scenes. One is the UPC code. The second I think of is container format harmonization. So all shipping containers are all the same. These two things that you don't really think of every day, but have become just so important to retail and the retail industry. So George Laurier, inventor of the UPC, dies at 94. Lastly, Stitch Fix CEO talks up the future for online fashion company. And so, their shares, this one talks about the shares going up and down on CNBC. They've been going up and down for years, from 18 to 36, from 18 and then back again. This talks about that it's, it is still fundamentally a really interesting, really great business. So do check it out if you don't know or know enough about Stitch Fix. Well, all right. Well, that is a wrap on this edition of The Voice of Retail. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on Apple, iTunes, or your favorite podcast platform. Please rate and review. Be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of ME LeBlanc Company, Inc. You can learn more about me on www.meleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a great week.